The air inside the rock-cut tomb was stagnant, heavy with the suffocating weight of 2,000 years of absolute, unbroken silence. In the dim, flickering, uncertain light of a handheld archaeological torch, the fine white limestone dust seemed to dance, disturbed for the very first time since a heavy, rough-hewn stone slab was sealed shut by grieving hands in antiquity. The excavator's fingers moved with a practiced, agonizing slowness, brushing away millennia of accumulated earth, debris, and salt-crusted decay to reveal the fragile, hollow contours of a human skull. But as the shifting shadows danced across the ancient bone, the sudden, narrow beam of light caught something impossible. A sharp, brilliant, undeniable glint of metallic yellow, resting precisely between the bleached, parted jaws of the dead. 24 individual pieces of gold, carefully hammered and deliberately placed into the mouths of 24 silent individuals across this sprawling necropolis. They were not scattered coins tossed in as a careless bribe. They were not random fragments of accumulated wealth hoarded for the long, cold dark of eternity. They were thin, unmistakable, deeply intentional foils shaped exactly like human tongues. They had been placed deliberately, intimately, right where a living, breathing tongue would rest within the dark cavern of the oral cavity. Some were robust and broad, clearly fashioned for the heavy jaws of adults who had lived full, complex, and deeply human lives in a vanished world. Others were heartbreakingly small, crafted with agonizing, desperate care to fit the fragile, innocent mouths of children. Why gold? Why the distinct, undeniable, specific shape of a tongue? And why bury such a bizarre, hyper-specific treasure in this sun-baked, windswept, forgotten stretch of the Mediterranean coast? No one had ever seen anything quite like this arrangement. But these golden tongues weren't merely elaborate decorations or hollow, arrogant displays of accumulated earthly wealth. They were something far more extraordinary. They were highly specialized tools. They were functional, essential equipment designed for a terrifying purpose that reveals exactly how seriously the ancient world took the perilous journey after our final breath. These artifacts were engineered to let the dead speak in the afterlife. More specifically, they were designed to allow the deceased to speak clearly, flawlessly, and convincingly before the pantheon of gods in a harrowing, high-stakes trial that would definitively determine their eternal fate. What kind of civilization equips its dead for a literal, life-or-death conversation with the gods? And what does it reveal about us, about the profound, unyielding depth of human hope, primal fear, and enduring love in the face of absolute loss, that they meticulously place divine gold on the tongues of their children, just to make absolutely sure even the youngest and most vulnerable could boldly plead their case before eternity? The answer surprised everyone. If you were listening to this on your morning commute, working quietly in your home, or simply resting with your eyes closed in the dark, settle in and let the noise of the modern world fade away for a while. We are going on a journey far beyond the familiar, tourist-crowded monuments of antiquity. We are traveling from the salt-crusted, tightly sealed subterranean tombs of Egypt's northern Mediterranean coast, plunging deep into the terrifying, torch-lit Hall of Judgment as described in the ancient, sacred verses of the Book of the Dead, and reaching across the breadth of the ancient world to everywhere human beings stubbornly refuse to let death have the final, silent word. Our destination is a place where the rigid boundaries between the bustling living and the silent dead completely blur. Marina, el-Alamein sits quietly on Egypt's northern Mediterranean coast, roughly 300 kilometers west of the sprawling modern metropolis of Cairo, and about 100 kilometers west of the legendary scholarly city of Alexandria. Now, you might hear the name el-Alamein and immediately think of the grinding, pivotal, diesel-fumed tank battles of World War II. But this is definitely not that el-Alamein. This is something much older, a Greco-Roman archaeological site of astonishing, world-class preservation and immense complexity. A once thriving, wealthy coastal town that flourished brilliantly in the sun from roughly the 1st century BC right through to the twilight of the 4th century AD. This town was a prosperous, fiercely independent Mediterranean port, its bustling streets alive with the chaotic sounds of international commerce, shouting merchants, and the relentless, salty breeze of the open sea. Its population was a vibrant, messy, endlessly fascinating cultural fusion of deeply rooted Egyptian, philosophical Greek, and pragmatic Roman traditions. It was a true cultural crossroads, a dynamic place where the ancient, deeply mystical pharaonic world violently collided and seamlessly merged with the rational, organized, classical Mediterranean. Today, the modern landscape is a hauntingly beautiful, sun-drenched tapestry of bleached limestone ruins overlooking the impossible, sparkling turquoise expanse of the Mediterranean Sea. If you were to walk through the quiet site today, your boots kicking up white dust, you would see partially excavated, sprawling aristocratic villas with remarkably intact, intricate mosaic floors that once hosted lavish, wine-soaked intellectual banquets. There are sprawling, complex thermal baths where influential citizens gossiped in the thick steam, a grand, towering basilica where the faithful eventually gathered, and the undeniable, sweeping remains of a highly sophisticated, deeply cosmopolitan community that thrived against the chaotic odds of history. But the most striking detail wasn't the bustling town itself. It was where they placed their dead. A dedicated, fiercely patient Polish, Egyptian archaeological mission, led primarily by tenacious researchers from the University of Warsaw, has been meticulously working this windswept, challenging site since the early 1980s. Over the long decades, they have slowly uncovered the complex secrets of the living, but recent, highly anticipated seasons have intensely focused on the necropolis, the sprawling, silent, subterranean city of the dead. This massive, sprawling burial ground was carved directly into the unforgiving, solid limestone bedrock south of the town, creating a vast, dark, subterranean mirror of the brightly lit world above. These rock-cut tombs are astounding architectural marvels of enduring grief and obsessive memory. They feature long, steep, descending entrance corridors that lead visitors deep into the cool earth, finally opening into dark, terrifyingly quiet burial chambers. Some are grand, expansive family tombs, designed with multiple, stacked burial slots to fiercely keep bloodlines together, even in the suffocating dark. Many of these profound, deeply personal resting places were sealed incredibly tight, with massive, immovable stone slabs remaining totally unopened and undisturbed for approximately 2,000 years. During recent breakthrough excavation seasons, the seasoned archaeological team experienced the kind of heart-stopping moments that every excavator secretly dreams of. They carefully breached several of these perfectly sealed tombs, stepping cautiously into stale air that had not been breathed since the chaotic days of the Roman Empire. Inside, resting in the absolute, terrifying quiet, they found skeletal remains. But the heavy silence was suddenly broken by the sharp, impossible gleam of pristine metal. 24 gold tongue-shaped foils were discovered scattered across multiple burials, quietly waiting in the eternal dark. Let's examine these golden tongues in close, almost forensic, microscopic detail. They are thin, impossibly delicate gold foils, hammered by highly skilled ancient artisans to an astonishing, paper-like thinness. Some are only a fraction of a single millimeter thick, so profoundly fragile they could easily flutter away in a heavy, careless breath. Yet, they are shaped unmistakably, undeniably, and purposefully like human tongues, elongated ovals, slightly but noticeably tapered, finishing with a rounded, perfectly smooth tip. Even highly experienced, deeply cynical excavators paused in awe when they saw the staggering level of craftsmanship. Some of these delicate, silent pieces bear carefully embossed, deliberate details. There are faint, intentional lines, tiny raised ridges, and subtle, incredibly specific surface texturing deliberately meant to mimic the actual, biological surface of a real human tongue. The ancient artisans were not just casually making vague, symbolic shapes. They were painstakingly crafting highly accurate anatomical replacements. The profound variation in size is perhaps the most arresting, deeply moving detail of all. There are large, heavy, adult-sized tongues, crafted for those who would live long enough to accumulate their own complex sins and hard-won virtues. But scattered among them are smaller ones, clearly, intentionally, and heartbreakingly made for small children or very young adolescents. They were found perfectly in situ, still positioned directly in, or immediately near the dark oral cavity of the skeletal remains. They lay precisely where a living, speaking tongue would naturally rest. The elemental material itself holds the critical key to the entire mystery. These were not solid, heavy gold bars meant to cheaply bribe a mythological ferryman. They were incredibly thin, almost leaf-like foils. Their true, immense value lay not in the literal, earthly weight of the gold, but in its profound, cosmic, symbolic significance. In the intricate, dizzying tapestry of ancient Egyptian belief, gold was not just a precious, shiny metal to be traded. It was the literal, actual flesh of the eternal gods. It was perfectly imperishable, untarnished, and inherently eternal. The one known substance on earth that completely defied the rot, decay, and inevitable oblivion of time. By placing this divine, incorruptible material intimately in the mouth, they were literally imparting a physical piece of eternity to the deceased. When the seasoned archaeologists first saw the sharp glint of gold in that dark limestone tomb, they knew instantly they had found something that entirely transcended simple, common burial goods. They were looking at a highly specific, ancient insurance policy. Think about the staggering, almost unbearable emotional weight of those children's burials for a moment. Parents, drowning in the incomprehensible, blinding grief of losing a young child in the dangerous ancient world, sat down and deliberately commissioned a golden tongue from a specialized craftsman. They, or the grieving community, placed it gently in the small, lifeless mouth, ensuring that even their youngest, most innocent, most vulnerable child would have a strong, clear, golden voice in the terrifying dark. They wanted to make absolutely certain that the child could speak for themselves in the terrifying, cosmic trials to come. But to understand why these tongues were placed so carefully, why they absolutely had to be made of gold specifically, and what, exactly, the dead were expected to say, we need to journey much deeper. We must step out of the physical, limestone tombs of Marina, el-Alamein, and plunge directly into the terrifying, awe-inspiring ancient Egyptian afterlife itself. We are heading into a divine, torchlit courtroom older than any on earth, a place where the dead stood trial for their very existence. The journey did not end in the sun-baked tombs of Marina el-Alamein. It merely paused before descending into the shadowed valleys of the Duat. For the ancient Egyptians, death was never a final curtain. It was a perilous transition. It was an arduous, terrifying trek through a multidimensional underworld teeming with supernatural hazards and absolute darkness. This realm, the Duat, was an invisible cosmic landscape of jagged cavernous depths, rivers of boiling fire, and labyrinthine pathways guarded by demonic gatekeepers clutching enormous knives. Every single soul had to navigate this lightless terrain. It was a treacherous migration designed to test the limits of human endurance and spiritual purity. Funerary texts describe horrific entities with names like He Who Dances in Blood or the Swallower of Shadows, creatures that lurked in the obsidian darkness, waiting to annihilate the unprepared traveler. Surviving this hostile environment was not merely a matter of human courage. It required exact, meticulous preparation. The human entity was considered a complex mechanism, constructed of distinct spiritual parts. There was the Ka, the vital spark of life force that required physical nourishment and an intact, preserved vessel to inhabit. There was the Ba, the unique personality and individual soul, frequently depicted as a human-headed bird possessing the ability to fly freely between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead. And finally, there was the ultimate goal, the Ak. The Ak was the fully realized, glorified spiritual entity that emerged victorious only after successfully completing the grueling trials of the afterlife journey. To transform into an Ak, a person needed vastly more than just a quiet burial. They required a comprehensive arsenal of magical protection. This is precisely why the physical body underwent the elaborate process of mummification. The corpse was ritually purified, dried for 70 days in caustic natron salt, wrapped in hundreds of yards of resin-soaked linen, and adorned with magically charged amulets positioned flawlessly over major organs. These were not mere funeral decorations meant to look beautiful. They were tactical survival gear for a hostile spiritual environment. The deceased also carried intricate spells and navigational instructions, most famously compiled in illuminated scrolls like the Book of the Dead, serving as a metaphysical map of protective incantations. Their ultimate destination, was the Field of Reeds, known as Aru. This was a breathtaking, sunlit paradise of eternal abundance. It was envisioned as a mirrored reflection of the earthly Egyptian Nile Valley, but entirely devoid of sickness, sudden death, crop failure, or suffering. It was a golden eternity of peace. Yet, the doors to Aru did not open freely for just anyone. The paradise was locked securely behind a final, terrifying barrier. Consider the staggering weight of this belief system. For over 3,000 consecutive years, a span of time considerably longer than Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism have existed combined, billions of human beings lived and died believing that their eternal fate hinged entirely on surviving one specific trial. No one bypassed it. Even the wealthiest pharaohs and the poorest farmers had to stand utterly exposed before the exact same divine tribunal. But what if the dead could not remember the precise words to say when the gods finally commanded them to speak? The treacherous path through the horrors of the Duat ultimately converged on a single, vast chamber known as the Hall of Two Truths, or the Hall of Ma'at. This is where the true terror of the ancient Egyptian afterlife officially began. Imagine the sensory shock of walking out of the pitch-black caverns of the underworld and stepping into a colossal, echoing courtroom carved from metaphysical stone. The sheer architectural scale of the space would have been utterly paralyzing to the fragile human soul. At the far imposing end of this cavernous hall sat the supreme judge of the dead. It was Osiris, the resurrected lord of the underworld, presiding in quiet majesty upon a raised throne. He was typically depicted with vibrant green skin, a stark color symbolizing eternal rebirth and the fertile earth of the Nile. His body was wrapped entirely in pristine white mummy linen, restricting his movements but amplifying his silent power. In his crossed arms, he gripped the crook and the flail. These were the ultimate, undeniable symbols of pharaonic authority, agricultural dominance, and absolute divine judgment. He watched the proceedings in unblinking silence. Flanking the immense chamber were the terrifying members of the jury. They were not ordinary, sympathetic peers, but 42 towering, intimidating assessor gods. Each of these specialized divine jurors was singularly responsible for judging one specific earthly sin, and their physical appearances were deliberately, psychologically monstrous. Ancient papyri depict these judges with the menacing heads of snapping crocodiles, snarling jackals, venomous snakes, and carrion vultures. Some were known by descriptive titles like Bone Breaker, Eater of Entrails, or Swallower of Shades. They sat perfectly still in a rigid, unbroken line, waiting patiently to hear the deceased offer their desperate defense. The profound ceremony commenced only when Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and guardian of the graveyard, stepped gracefully forward. He gently but firmly took the trembling hand of the deceased soul, leading them out of the shadows and toward the brightly lit center of the monumental hall. Anubis guided them directly to an enormous, intricately carved, gleaming golden scale. This was not a tool of commerce. It was the flawless mechanism of ultimate cosmic justice. In the dead center of the room, the legendary weighing of the heart took place. The deceased's actual physical heart, the organ the Egyptians believed was the absolute center of human thought, complex emotion, memory, and conscience, was placed gently onto the waiting brass pan of one side of the great scale. On the opposite side, the attending gods placed the feather of Ma'at. This single delicate ostrich feather represented the fundamental cosmic order, absolute unvarnished truth, and flawless universal justice. Think deeply about the physical reality of a simple bird's feather. It weighs practically nothing at all. It is lighter than a gentle breath of wind. It can be blown away by a sigh. Yet, this nearly weightless, fragile object was the absolute immovable standard of human morality. If the deceased's heart was heavy with a long lifetime of unrepented sin, casual cruelty, unconfessed guilt, hidden malice, or deceit, its dark gravity would instantly pull the scale down. If the heart was pure, innocent, and unburdened by evil, it would balance perfectly, hanging in suspended harmony against the delicate feather. Standing quietly beside the towering scale, meticulously recording the precise outcome on a vast unrolled papyrus scroll, was Thoth. He was the ibis-headed god of infinite wisdom, writing, and divine measurement. He served as the impartial clerk of the highest court, his sharpened reed pen ready to write the final unalterable verdict from which there was absolutely no appeal. But the most horrifying visceral presence in the room waited silently in the deep shadows just beneath the golden balance. It was Ammit, the legendary devourer of the dead. She possessed the heavy armored head of a Nile crocodile, the powerful leaping torso of a desert lion, and the massive inescapable hindquarters of a river hippopotamus. She did not judge the dead. She did not question them. She only waited, her eyes locked on the swinging brass pans. If the scale tipped heavily toward the earth, if the heart proved too dense with accumulated malice, Ammit would lunge forward with terrifying speed and consume the heavy heart in a single devastating bloody bite. This was the ultimate unspeakable terror. It was not a promise of endless conscious punishment. It was something far worse, a second permanent death. It was total irreversible annihilation of the self. The person simply ceased to exist completely in all realms. Their given name, their unique soul, their entire memory, obliterated instantly into the dark vacuum of oblivion. No glorious afterlife, no golden paradise. Nothing remained but endless, empty, deafening silence. Even experienced excavators paused when they first saw the exquisite, fragile precision of the golden tongues, suddenly understanding the horrifying, eternal stakes of this ancient courtroom. But before the vulnerable heart could be weighed on the golden scale, before the scribe Thoth could record the final verdict, and before the beast Ammit could strike, the deceased was required to perform one final, terrifying task. They had to speak. The ultimate trial was not a silent, passive procedure where the soul simply stood by and watched their fate unfold. The soul had to stand completely exposed before the terrifying, watchful array of the 42 assessor gods and recite what is now known to historians as the 42 negative confessions. These were 42 absolute, uncompromising declarations of personal innocence, and each distinct statement had to be addressed directly by name to the specific, monstrous god responsible for punishing that particular transgression. The deceased had to look directly into the unblinking eyes of gods like Eater of Entrails or Swallower of Blood, and forcefully, clearly declare their absolute moral purity. The ancient funerary texts, such as the magnificently illustrated Papyrus of Ani, dating to roughly 1250 BC, outline exactly what these desperate, trembling souls were expected to say out loud in the echoing expanse of the justice hall. I have not committed sin. I have not robbed with violence. I have not stolen. I have not uttered lies. I have not caused pain. I have not caused tears. I have not killed. I have not polluted the water. I have not made anyone suffer. These firm declarations were profoundly significant. They were not merely a mundane checklist of arbitrary localized rules for a small desert cult. They represented one of the earliest, most comprehensive moral codes in recorded human history. They formed a highly sophisticated, deeply empathetic ethical framework that predated the biblical Ten Commandments by many centuries. The ancient Egyptians had successfully constructed a complex civilization where maintaining cosmic justice required strict personal accountability for exactly how one treated other human beings, how respectfully one interacted with the natural environment, and how steadfastly one upheld the delicate, sacred balance of truth. But there was a critical, profoundly dangerous mechanical catch embedded deep in this divine legal system. The deceased absolutely had to recite these 42 confessions out loud. Speaking was not an optional, symbolic part of the ancient ceremony. It was the fundamental, non-negotiable mechanism of eternal salvation. Without a functioning, articulate voice, the confession simply could not happen. And without the spoken confession, the heart was placed onto the golden scale in complete, damning silence. In the Hall of Two Truths, silence meant judgment without a defense. It meant conceding guilt. It meant certain catastrophic failure. The dead were absolutely terrified that their physical bodies, bound tight in miles of linen and slowly degrading in the dark, silent tomb, might somehow lose the physical ability to articulate these crucial, life-saving words. They feared, with a visceral dread, that their mouths would be magically bound, that their jaws would rigidly lock in rigor mortis, or that their physical, muscular tongues would turn to dry dust before they could clearly speak their innocence to Osiris. This deep, paralyzing fear is precisely why the golden tongues mattered so incredibly much. They were not extravagant, meaningless decorations designed to show off the earthly wealth of the deceased. They were highly specialized, purposeful theological insurance. They were divine manufactured guarantees, meticulously engineered by temple priests to ensure that the dead would possess an imperishable, flawless voice exactly when they needed it most. What makes this specific burial practice especially haunting isn't the monetary value of the gold itself, but the literal, supernatural power the ancient world assigned to it. The choice of gold for these vital linguistic prosthetics was entirely deliberate and profoundly meaningful. In the complex symbolic theology of ancient Egypt, gold was never chosen randomly, and it was never viewed merely as a mundane symbol of financial wealth or earthly status. Gold was literally, physically considered to be the actual flesh of the gods. The supreme solar deity, the creator god Ra, who sailed his boat across the sky each day, was believed to have skin made entirely of pure, gleaming, indestructible gold. When the ancient Egyptian priests and jewelers looked at this precious heavy metal, they did not just see a highly valuable commodity to be traded. They saw a physical, tangible fragment of the divine realm resting in their hands. Furthermore, gold possesses a unique, almost supernatural chemical property that ancient observers acutely recognized. It does not tarnish, it does not corrode, it does not rust, rot, or decay, no matter how many centuries it is buried in the damp earth or sealed inside a lightless, suffocating tomb. It remains brilliant, pure, and incorruptible forever. Gold is eternal, just exactly as the afterlife was desperately meant to be eternal. By hammering a piece of pure divine gold into the precise anatomical shape of a human tongue and deliberately placing it inside the mouth of the deceased, the ancient priests were performing a profound magical act of metaphysical alchemy. They were symbolically and functionally transforming the decaying human tongue into a divine, indestructible, eternal instrument. They were guaranteeing that when the deceased finally stood in the terrifying, echoing expanse of the Hall of Two Truths, the voice that emerged from their dry lips would not be the frail, trembling, uncertain whisper of a dead mortal. It would be the resonant, eternal voice of a god. A golden tongue meant the deceased did not merely speak their innocence hoping to be believed. They spoke with absolute, undeniable divine authority. The sheer theological sophistication of this burial practice is staggering to contemplate. The people living in the coastal town of Marina, el-Alamein, were not just throwing expensive gold at their dead to thoughtlessly show off their elevated social status. They were intentionally engineering a highly specific material solution to a terrifying, existential spiritual vulnerability. They clearly recognized a critical, fatal flaw in the human condition, the inevitable decay of the physical body, and they applied a specifically divine material to permanently repair it, ensuring their loved ones could successfully navigate the most critical, dangerous requirement of their eternal trial. The 24 golden tongues carefully recovered from the rock-cut tombs of Marina, el-Alamein were not isolated, eccentric curiosities left behind by a confused culture. They were vital functional components of a highly sophisticated, deeply considered belief system that treated death not as an end, but as the beginning of the most important structurally complex process a human being would ever undergo. Every single hammered golden tongue represented a profound, heartbreaking act of love, combined with meticulous theological engineering. The grieving parents who carefully placed tiny, delicate gold foils into the silent, unmoving mouths of their deceased children were not performing an empty, superstitious ritual to make themselves feel better. They were doing everything within their earthly power to ensure their beloved child could speak boldly and clearly before the terrifying throne of Osiris. They were actively arming their vulnerable loved ones with the very flesh of the gods to help them survive the ultimate terrifying judgment of the soul. These golden tongues were not decorative ornaments, but precision theological instruments, engineered to solve a specific spiritual problem using a specific divine material. This reveals a remarkable civilization that approached the mysteries of death with the exact same rigor, logic, and intentionality that modern engineers bring to their most critical life-saving systems. But the sun-baked coastal town of Marina, el-Alamein isn't the only place where these divine instruments have been hidden in the dark. Across the vast expanse of Egypt, From the flooded ancient ruins of the Nile Delta to the shifting bone-dry sands of the city of Oxyrhynchus, archaeologists are continuing to discover pure gold glinting in the mouths of the dead, suggesting this practice was far more widespread than anyone initially realized. The discoveries at Marina, el-Alamein were extraordinary, unearthing 24 bodies, each holding a gleaming sliver of gold in their mouths, felt like uncovering a unique theological obsession. But as archaeologists would soon realize, they were not looking at a local anomaly. The golden tongues of Marina el-Alamein were far from alone. Across the vast and varied landscape of Egypt, the exact same ritualistic practice has slowly emerged from tomb after sun-baked tomb. It is a phenomenon that forces us to reconsider how widespread this desperate bid for eternal speech truly was. Our journey takes us westward along the jagged Mediterranean coast, following ancient trade routes away from the bustling streets of Alexandria. Here, the landscape flattens out into an endless horizon, the harsh, unforgiving desert pressing relentlessly against the azure blue of the sea. We arrive at Taposiris Magna, a ruined, ghostly city whose name literally translates to the Great Tomb of Osiris. The site is dramatic, dominated by the crumbling, salt-crusted limestone walls of a massive temple precinct that has stood defiant against the sea for over 2,000 years. Taposiris Magna has captured the modern world's imagination, primarily because of one fiercely dedicated woman. For more than 15 years, Dominican-born archaeologist Kathleen Martinez has led a tireless search through these limestone ruins. She is hunting for the ultimate prize of classical antiquity, the lost tomb of Cleopatra VII, the legendary last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. But the most striking discovery at Taposiris Magna hasn't been a royal tomb. It has been the bizarre condition of the everyday dead. While the resting place of Cleopatra remains notoriously elusive, hiding somewhere beneath the bedrock or the encroaching waves, Martinez's exhaustive excavations have uncovered something almost as remarkable. Deep within the suffocating, rock-cut shafts, her team found multiple burials containing delicate, gold tongue-shaped foils. These were deliberately placed directly into the mouths of the deceased, resting perfectly against the dry bone of the jaw where a living, fleshy tongue once sat. The mummies of Taposiris Magna date precisely to the Ptolemaic period, an era spanning roughly from 300 to 30 BC. This was an epoch of immense cultural upheaval. Greek pharaohs, the ambitious descendants of Alexander the Great's general Ptolemy, now ruled over the ancient land of the Nile. They brought their own pantheon of gods, their own complex language, and their own rigid administrative structures. Yet, they were simultaneously seduced by the intoxicating power and sheer, terrifying antiquity of Egyptian religion. The discovery of these gold tongues here confirms a crucial truth. The practice existed and flourished at the absolute highest levels of Greco-Egyptian society. Even experienced excavators paused when they saw one particular burial. Inside a narrow, claustrophobic rock-cut chamber, the team discovered a mummy whose preparation went far beyond a simple gold tongue. The deceased had been adorned with intricate, breathtaking gold leaf facial features. The entire face was partially covered in wafer-thin, gleaming gold, transforming a decaying corpse into a blinding, immortal visage. The gold tongue was present, resting silently behind the golden lips, locked in a state of perpetual readiness. This wasn't just a burial. It was a physical, tangible manifestation of divine aspiration. The gold was meant to endure, to shine relentlessly in the perpetual darkness of the tomb, and to guarantee that when the soul finally awoke in the Hall of Two Truths, it would speak with the booming, undeniable voice of the gods themselves. Here, hundreds of kilometers from the coastal winds of Marina, el-Alamein, we find the exact same ritual, the same unwavering belief, the same profound, meticulous care taken to ensure the dead could defend themselves in the perilous courts of the underworld. From the coastal ruins, we move sharply inland. The environment changes rapidly. The salt spray of the Mediterranean is replaced by the humid, verdant, sprawling expanse of the Nile Delta. It is here, submerged in the agricultural heartland of Egypt, that we find another crucial piece of the puzzle. In 2023, Egyptian archaeologists excavating at Qusna, located in the densely populated Garbia Governorate, made a staggering announcement. They had uncovered a vast, multi-tiered necropolis containing burials that spanned multiple, distinct historical periods. And among the myriad of finds, the crumbling cartonnage, faded linen, and scattered pottery sherds were mummies equipped with familiar, gleaming amulets. Gold tongue-shaped foils had been placed precisely within their gaping mouths. What makes Khoisan so incredibly significant isn't merely the presence of the tongues. It is what they represent across the brutal passage of time. The necropolis spans from the late period, through the Ptolemaic era, and deep into the Roman period. This unbroken, continuous use shows that the gold tongue practice was not a fleeting trend or a brief religious fad. It persisted across centuries. It survived the rise and fall of dynasties, the shifting of imperial borders, and the steady march of time. So who were they burying? No one is certain. The precise identities of the individuals laid to rest at Khoisan have largely been lost to history. Their names, once proudly painted on wooden coffins, have rotted away in the damp, unforgiving delta soil. But their spiritual armor remains perfectly intact. The intricate burials here were astonishingly rich in complex theological defense mechanisms, proving that rural populations possessed a deep, sophisticated understanding of afterlife cosmology. Alongside the golden tongues, archaeologists uncovered a wealth of other protective amulets designed to shield the fragile soul from demonic entities. There were intricately carved scarabs, explicitly designed to replace the physical heart and prevent it from testifying against the deceased during the final judgment. There were delicate gold leaf decorations in the shape of lotus flowers, meant to encase the rotting body in imperishable divine flesh. And there was the wedget, the iconic eye of Horus, a potent, universally recognized symbol of healing, restoration, and ultimate cosmic protection. The dead of Khoisan were heavily armed for their spiritual journey, equipped for a literal war in the underworld. The geographical location of this discovery is critical. Khoisan sits deep in the muddy Nile Delta, far removed from the cosmopolitan, heavily Hellenized influence of the Mediterranean coast. Its very existence proves that the Golden Tongue was not an isolated coastal phenomenon. It wasn't merely a luxury practice reserved for the wealthy merchants and bureaucratic officials of port cities like Alexandria or Marina, el-Alamein. It had reached deep into the traditional, agricultural heart of Egypt. The rural farmers, the local administrators, the priests of the provincial temples, they too believed that gold was absolutely necessary to navigate the terrors of the Duat. And the map of these discoveries only continues to expand. As modern archaeology painstakingly uncovers more of the ancient world, the seemingly isolated instances of golden tongues have rapidly coalesced into an undeniable, sweeping pattern. Consider Oxyrhynchus, the modern town of El-Banasa. This site is world famous for its vast trove of discarded papyri, which provided scholars with an unprecedented look into the daily lives, legal disputes, and administrative minutiae of ordinary people. But Oxyrhynchus was also a sprawling city of the dead. Recent, careful excavations among its sandy ruins have revealed multiple burials featuring, you guessed it, gold tongues resting within the jaws of the deceased. Travel further south, down the meandering path of the Nile, to the iconic sands of Saqqara. This sprawling necropolis served the ancient capital of Memphis for over 3,000 years. It is home to the Step Pyramid of Djoser, the oldest stone pyramid in the world. Yet even here, amid the imposing monuments of the Old Kingdom, recent digs have uncovered late-period burials equipped with gold-tongued mummies. The ancient, specialized practice was literally grafted onto the most sacred, historically dense ground in all of Egypt. Look to the north again, to Tel el-Balamun, another remote delta site where the rising water table threatens to consume history. Even in these saturated, muddy soils, archaeologists have carefully extracted golden tongues from the crumbling, waterlogged remains of the dead. Yet the most haunting realization didn't come from where they were found, but when. While the foundational roots of the practice may faintly extend into earlier Egyptian dynasties, the vast, overwhelming majority of these golden tongues appear during the Ptolemaic period, from 323 to 30 BC, and the subsequent Roman period, stretching from 30 BC into the 4th century AD. The geographic spread is nothing short of staggering, from the sun-drenched Mediterranean coast down through the muddy, fertile veins of the Nile Delta and stretching far into the unforgiving heat of Upper Egypt. This was a nationwide practice, a unifying theological thread connecting millions of lives. To put this in perspective, At least a dozen major archaeological sites across the length and breadth of Egypt have now yielded gold tongue burials, and the thrilling pace of discovery is only accelerating. New finds emerge almost every single excavation season, painting a vivid, undeniable picture of a civilization profoundly, utterly obsessed with the power of speech in the afterlife. What once seemed like a localized oddity is now recognized as a fundamental pillar of Greco-Roman Egyptian funerary rites. If you're finding this journey into the ancient underworld as compelling as we do, a quick like helps share it with other curious minds. And we'd love to know, had you ever heard of the golden tongue practice before today? Let us know in the comments. Let us pause and look back at the winding path we have traveled. We began in the dusty, sealed tombs of Marina, el-Alamein. Staring down at the gleam of gold in the mouths of the forgotten dead, we descended into the labyrinthine cosmology of the Egyptian afterlife, standing in the courtroom of Osiris to witness the ultimate judgment of the human soul. We listened closely to the 42 negative confessions in the Papyrus of Ani, understanding the desperate need for a supernatural voice that could not lie, fail, or be silenced. And we have just tracked this extraordinary, obsessive ritual across the entire map of Egypt, from the coastal ports to the ancient capital of Memphis. The pattern is unmistakable. Across vast stretches of time and unforgiving geography, the people of Egypt deliberately placed gold in the mouths of their dead to ensure they could speak before the gods. But what the archaeologist found next changed everything we thought we knew. Marina, el-Alamein wasn't a purely Egyptian site. It was a Greco-Roman city, heavily populated by colonists and merchants from across the sea. And the Greeks, who had lived, traded, and ruled in Egypt for centuries by this point, had their own, remarkably parallel practice. They too placed metal in the mouths of their dead, but they did it for an entirely different supernatural purpose. We are about to encounter Charon, the grim, unyielding Greek ferryman of the dead. We are about to witness the extraordinary cultural fusion that occurred when two great ancient civilizations merged their deepest, most terrifying beliefs about what happens when we die. So settle back in, because the story of the golden tongues is about to become something even more remarkable, a window into what happens when two ancient worlds combine their hopes for eternity. To truly understand the Greek perspective on death, we must understand their rivers. For the ancient Hellenic world, the afterlife was not reached by walking across a scorching desert or navigating a series of magically guarded gates. It was reached by water, specifically the dark, sluggish, and toxic waters of the river Styx, or the river Acheron, which permanently separated the brightly lit world of the living from the gloomy, subterranean realm of Hades. But crossing this terrifying river was not free. There was a strict toll to be paid. The ferryman was Charon, often depicted as a ragged, terrifying figure who relentlessly demanded payment for his services. The Greek practice, dating back to at least the 5th century BC in mainland Greece, was incredibly simple but ruthlessly enforced. The grieving family would carefully place a small coin, an obolos, directly in the mouth or over the closed eyes of the deceased before burial. Without this specific physical coin, the consequences were unthinkable. The unpaying dead would be stranded on the desolate riverbank for eternity, wailing and wandering in the freezing mist, unable to reach their final rest. When researchers X-rayed these specific skulls, the placement was identical down to the millimeter. Both the Egyptian golden tongues and the Greek obols involved the deliberate placement of metal inside the mouth of a corpse to ensure a successful, safe passage to the afterlife. Yet, they were driven by completely different spiritual logic. For the Egyptian, the precious metal was a magical tool of divine speech, an instrument of legal defense in a celestial courtroom. For the Greek, the base metal was pure commerce. It was pragmatic, cold, hard cash designed to pay off a supernatural ferryman. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC, he did not just bring armies, he brought Greek culture, philosophy, and religious dogma. When his general Ptolemy subsequently established a powerful Greek dynasty that would rule from Alexandria for 300 years, these two massive, distinct theological traditions violently collided. But over centuries, they did not just awkwardly coexist, they intimately intertwined. The result was a stunning cultural fusion where the theological precision of the Egyptian afterlife merged seamlessly with the brutal, transactional pragmatism of the Greek underworld. This fusion is etched directly, unmistakably, into the archaeological record. At sites exactly like Marina, el-Alamein, the cultural lines blur entirely. When modern excavators crack open the sealed, rock-cut tombs of this coastal city, they do not find a strict separation of cultures. They find both. They find shimmering gold tongues. They find oxidized bronze coins. And incredibly, sometimes they find both practices executed simultaneously in the very same burial. The grieving families of Greco-Roman Egypt took absolutely no chances with eternity. They equipped loved ones for both perilous journeys. The dead were given a golden tongue to speak eloquently before the judgment of Osiris, and simultaneously given a bronze coin clamped between their teeth to pay off Charon at the muddy Styx. They were hedging their spiritual bets, arming the soul against every conceivable danger the afterlife might throw at them. The golden tongue practice wasn't merely an isolated, local custom. It was a widespread, centuries-long tradition spanning all of Egypt, and at Greco-Roman sites like Marina, el-Alamein. It represents one of history's most remarkable cultural fusions. Two great civilizations seamlessly merging their deepest, most desperate beliefs about death into a single, profoundly beautiful burial practice. The golden tongues, remarkable as they were, did not stand alone in the darkness. They were merely one component of a far more complex machinery of salvation. When excavators brushed away the centuries of salt-crusted sand at Marina, el-Alamein, they found that these radiant mouthpieces were accompanied by an elaborate constellation of protective artifacts. The dead were not just given a voice, they were armed for war. Among the most frequent companions to the golden tongues were small, intricately carved amulets depicting one of the most enduring symbols of the ancient world. They were fashioned from vibrant blue faience, a brilliantly glazed ceramic that sparkled in the light like crushed lapis lazuli, as well as carved from smooth, cold stone and occasionally cast in pure gold. This was the Wajet, the Eye of Horus. For the ancient Egyptians, the Eye of Horus was not merely a decorative motif. It was an active, vibrating source of magical defense. To understand its power, we have to look back to the foundational myth of the Egyptian state, a story of murder, usurpation, and cosmic vengeance. Horus was the falcon-headed god of the sky, the rightful heir to the throne of Egypt, born of Isis and the murdered king Osiris. His uncle, Set, the god of chaos, storms, and the barren desert, had violently usurped the throne in a brutal coup that shattered the divine order of the universe. In the ensuing mythological war to reclaim his father's kingdom, the battles between Horus and Set shook the very foundations of the earth. These were not mere skirmishes, they were cataclysmic clashes that threatened to plunge creation back into primordial chaos. During one particularly brutal encounter, Set managed to tear out the left eye of Horus, shattering it into pieces and scattering them across the vastness of the cosmos. It was a catastrophic blow, representing the temporary triumph of chaos over order, blindness over sight, and darkness over light. But the most striking detail wasn't the violence itself, it was how the damage was repaired. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, mathematics, and magic, patiently gathered the shattered fragments of the eye from the corners of the universe. Using his supreme magical knowledge, he carefully reassembled them, binding the pieces together. He restored the eye to its former glory, breathing life and wholeness back into the wounded god. From that moment on, the restored eye, the Wajet, meaning the whole ones or the intact one, became the supreme symbol of healing, absolute protection, and divine restoration. When you examine these tiny amulets found alongside the golden tongues, you begin to see the incredible precision of Egyptian magical thinking. The Wajet eye is composed of 6 distinct anatomical parts: the pupil, the sclera, the eyebrow, and the stylized markings of a falcon's cheek beneath it. But this wasn't just artistic license. Each individual component of the eye represented a specific fraction in ancient Egyptian mathematics. The inner corner of the eye was exactly 1/2. The pupil was 1/4. The eyebrow was 1/8. The outer corner was 1/16. The spiral curve beneath the eye was 1/32, and the teardrop mark was 1/64. If you take a moment to add those fractions together, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, and 1/64, the total comes to exactly 63/64. It does not equal 1. It does not equal a complete, whole number. The missing 1/64 is perhaps the most profound theological statement in all of ancient Egyptian mathematics. Scholars have long argued that this missing fraction was intentionally left out, meant to be supplied by the magic of Thoth himself. It is a beautiful, mathematically precise metaphor for a deeply human realization. No matter how hard we try to heal ourselves, true wholeness always requires a touch of divine intervention. Perfection is solely the domain of the gods. These amulets were placed carefully within the linen wrappings and directly on the bodies of the dead at Marina, el-Alamein, because the journey through the Duat was unspeakably dangerous. The underworld was a lightless, terrifying landscape of boiling lakes, venomous serpents, and decapitating demons that lurked in the shadows. The dead needed armor. If the golden tongue was a specialized tool designed specifically for the final trial, the weighing of the heart, the Eye of Horus was the comprehensive shield that allowed the deceased to survive long enough to reach that trial. Together, they formed a complete, interlocking afterlife survival kit, covering both the physical journey and the spiritual judgment. Yet, even with a voice of gold and the impenetrable shield of a god, the Egyptians knew a darker truth. The greatest threat to eternal life did not come from external demons or boiling lakes. It came from within. As excavators continued to map the labyrinthine burials at Marina el-Alamein, they discovered another crucial piece of this funerary technology. Resting squarely on the chest of many mummies, precisely over the anatomical location of the heart, lay a different kind of amulet entirely. It was a scarab beetle, meticulously carved from dark, heavy stone like steatite, basalt, or polished green jasper. To modern eyes, a humble dung beetle seems an unlikely candidate for intense religious veneration, but the Egyptians were master observers of the natural world. They spent centuries watching the scarab beetle meticulously rolling perfect spheres of dung across the sun-baked desert sand. They noticed that out of these seemingly dead, decaying spheres, new life eventually emerged when the beetle's eggs hatched. To the Egyptian mind, this was a perfect, living microcosm of the cosmos. They explicitly associated the beetle's rolling of the dung ball with the unseen forces of the sun god, Khepri, rolling the fiery disk of the sun across the sky each day, burying it in the underworld at night, and resurrecting it each dawn in a blaze of glory. The scarab became the ultimate, unstoppable engine of rebirth. But the large scarabs placed on the chests of the dead, known to archaeologists as heart scarabs, served a highly specific, almost legalistic function that went far beyond mere symbolism. Even experienced excavators paused when they saw the undersides of these stones. The flat base of the heart scarab was almost always inscribed with microscopic, perfectly incised hieroglyphs. These texts were usually carefully selected excerpts from chapter 30b of the Book of the Dead, and they contained a desperate, magical injunction directed directly at the deceased's own internal organs. The inscription reads with chilling clarity, "O my heart, which I had upon earth, do not stand up against me as a witness in the presence of the Lord of things. Do not speak against me. Do not act as my enemy before the divine tribunal. Do not cause the balance to tip against me." Consider the profound psychological insight embedded in that single piece of carved stone. The Egyptians believed the heart was the absolute seat of memory, emotion, and conscience. The brain was considered useless and discarded during mummification, but the heart was carefully preserved. During the final judgment, it was the heart that would be weighed on the great scales against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth. But what if the person had lived a flawed, imperfect life? What if the heart remembered hidden sins, petty cruelties, or grave transgressions that the deceased desperately wanted to conceal from the gods? The heart, driven by absolute truth, could literally turn state's evidence against its owner, condemning the soul to eternal oblivion. The heart scarab was a fail-safe mechanism born of human anxiety. It was a magical gag order, explicitly commanding the conscience to remain completely silent during the most critical moment of existence. Think about the brilliant, multi-layered engineering of this entire theological system. The golden tongue ensures that you have the magical ability to speak eloquently, persuasively, and perfectly before the gods of the underworld. The heart scarab simultaneously ensures that your own conscience is bound by unyielding magic, completely unable to contradict your carefully crafted testimony. It was a meticulously designed defense strategy, crafted by brilliant theological minds to hack the divine legal system and guarantee a favorable verdict. But magic, spells, and golden amulets were only part of the ultimate equation. To truly achieve eternity, the physical vessel, the mortal body itself had to be protected from the crushing weight of time and the corrosive elements of the earth. At Marina, el-Alamein, some of the most elite and wealthy burials utilized a defense mechanism of staggering physical magnitude. Deep within the shadows of the rock-cut tombs, archaeologists found massive stone coffins carved from single, unbroken blocks of solid granite. These were the sarcophagi, the ultimate physical fortresses of the dead. The word sarcophagus is a linguistic irony borrowed from the Greeks. It comes from the Greek words sarx, meaning flesh, and phagon, meaning to eat. The Greeks literally called these enormous stone boxes flesh eaters, believing that the specific type of limestone used in early coffins possessed caustic chemical properties that rapidly accelerated the decomposition of the corpse. The profound historical irony is that the ancient Egyptians used these colossal stone containers for the exact opposite purpose. They were desperate to halt decomposition, to freeze time, and to preserve the physical form in perfect condition for eternity. Working with granite requires extraordinary patience and almost incomprehensible manual labor. Granite is an igneous rock, forged in the fires of the earth, and it is one of the hardest common stones found on the planet's surface. The ancient Egyptians did not possess steel or iron tools to cut it. Carving a coffin from a single block of granite required weeks, if not months, of punishing, relentless labor using only soft copper and bronze chisels, heavy dolerite pounding stones, coarse quartz sand abrasives, and the sheer, exhausting brute force of human muscle. The resulting artifacts are monumental in their scale and ambition. A finished granite sarcophagus could easily weigh between 2 and 5 tons. To put that staggering number into perspective, that is roughly the equivalent of dropping 2 to 3 modern automobiles into a subterranean burial chamber. Moving these massive blocks of stone into the narrow, confined, stiflingly hot spaces of rock-cut tombs required highly sophisticated engineering, specialized wooden sledges, and teams of coordinated laborers working in near-total darkness, chanting to keep time as they pulled. Why go to such astonishing, back-breaking extremes? Because granite, much like gold, was a physical, tangible manifestation of eternity. It was virtually indestructible. It could withstand the dampness of the earth, the crushing pressure of the rock above, and the slow, grinding erosion of the centuries that turn lesser things to dust. The body inside was not just meant to be buried, it was meant to be housed. It was designed to be a permanent, inviolable fortress for the K, the spiritual life force, to return to long after the world above had crumbled to dust and the names of kings had been forgotten. The staggering care involved in creating these complete burial assemblages, the delicate golden tongues, the mathematically perfect Eye of Horus amulets, the psychologically complex heart scarabs, and the immovable granite sarcophagi, reveals a society that fundamentally refused to accept death as a final destination. They invested enormous economic resources, unparalleled artistic skill, and profound theological thought into preparing their loved ones for eternity. But perhaps nowhere is that investment more striking or more heartbreaking than in the smallest graves found hidden at the site. So who were they burying with such elaborate, desperate care? No one is absolutely certain of their individual names, but the physical evidence left behind tells a haunting, deeply human story. Among the most emotionally resonant discoveries ever made at Marina, el-Alamein were the golden tongues that were deliberately scaled down. They were significantly smaller, thinner, and far more fragile. They had been carefully, painstakingly cut and shaped by master craftsmen to fit precisely inside a child's mouth. The burials of these children were surrounded by the exact same intricate machinery of salvation as the adults, but entirely miniaturized. Archaeologists found smaller, finely crafted faience amulets designed to protect tiny, vulnerable bodies. They uncovered small ceramic vessels, completely sealed with clay, likely containing small portions of food, milk, or water for the harrowing journey through the terrifying landscapes of the underworld. In some extraordinary, heartbreaking cases, these child burials also contained intensely personal objects, small, well-worn wooden toys, delicate beaded jewelry, and tiny tokens of affection tucked lovingly into the folds of the linen wrappings. What does this tell us about the parents who stood weeping in the harsh Egyptian sun 2,000 years ago? It tells us that they believed their beloved children would face the exact same terrifying afterlife trials as a fully grown adult. They believed their little ones would have to navigate the lightless caverns and face the demons of the Duat completely alone. They believed their children would have to stand in the towering, torch-lit Hall of Two Truths, dwarfed by the massive columns of the gods. And they believed, with absolute certainty, that their children would need to speak eloquently and defend themselves before the towering, imposing figure of Osiris, the Lord of the Dead. The sheer terror of that thought must have been overwhelming for a grieving mother or father. And so, they did everything in their earthly power to prepare them for the dark. They bought them the protective magic. They bought them the shining gold. They bought them the sacred amulets. They armed their children for a war they could not fight for them. Across thousands of years and vastly different belief systems, parents have always tried to protect their children. It is a universal human instinct that transcends time, culture, geography, and religion. The small golden tongues crafted for the children of Marina, el-Alamein, are not just dry archaeological curiosities to be catalogued in a museum. They are perhaps the most purely human, deeply emotional artifacts ever pulled from the shifting Egyptian sand. They are frozen testaments to parental grief, shining silently in the darkness of the tomb, whispering of a love that fiercely refuses to surrender, even to the grave. What makes this especially haunting isn't the gold itself, but the universal human impulse it represents. The Egyptians weren't the only civilization that refused to let their loved ones walk into the dark unprepared. Across the ancient world, from the meticulously stitched, radiant jade burial suits of Han Dynasty China, to the massive, ocean-going ship burials of the Scandinavian Vikings packed with weapons and wealth, to the ornate jade mouthpieces of the Maya hidden deep in the Mesoamerican jungle, humanity has consistently waged war against the finality of death. We have always tried to bribe the ferryman, to armor the fragile soul, and to give the silent dead a voice. And as we look closer at these disparate cultures, separated by vast oceans and countless centuries, the parallels become more striking than you might ever expect. The impulse to equip the dead for whatever comes next is not unique to the sun-baked sands of Egypt or the Hellenistic enclaves of the Mediterranean. To truly understand the golden tongues of Marina el-Alamein, we must look beyond the borders of the ancient Egyptian world. We must trace this instinct across oceans, across continents, and across millennia. When we do, a startling pattern emerges. The exact methods vary wildly, but the underlying psychological need, the desperate compulsion to ensure the deceased are prepared, protected, and capable of speech, echoes across the ruins of humanity's greatest empires. Consider the Maya civilization, thriving in the dense emerald rainforests of Mesoamerica, separated from Egypt by the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean and thousands of years of history. Yet, their rulers were buried with an astonishingly similar provision. When Maya kings and elites died, they were not given gold, for gold was not the ultimate symbol of value in their world. Instead, they were given jade. Jade was the absolute most precious material known to Mesoamerican cultures, a stone so hard and difficult to carve that working it required immense devotion. It symbolized breath, the enduring life force, the moisture of the earth, and the vital green of the maize stalk, which was the literal staff of life. But the most striking detail wasn't the jade itself. It was exactly where they placed it. In a ritual that feels uncanny in its resemblance to the golden tongues, the Maya placed jade pieces directly inside the mouths of their dead. The most famous example rests within the magnificent, towering temple of the inscriptions at Palenque. Deep within its stepped pyramidal structure lies the jade death mask of Pakal the Great, the legendary ruler who died in the year 683 AD. When archaeologists finally breached his sealed limestone sarcophagus after moving tons of rubble, they found a beautiful, perfectly polished jade bead resting inside the king's skeletal mouth. It was placed there to serve as his breath in the afterlife. The Maya deeply believed that this single piece of jade would facilitate the perilous transition between the sunlit world of the living and the dark, watery, terrifying depths of Xibalba, the underworld. The dead ruler would face horrific gods, twisted monsters, and agonizing trials of pain and cold. To navigate this terrifying realm, he would need to speak, to bargain, to trick the lords of death, and to command respect. The parallel is absolutely stunning. Here are two distinct, highly advanced civilizations, entirely oblivious to one another's existence, independently arriving at the exact same conclusion. They both faced the terrifying, absolute silence of death and responded by placing a precious, highly symbolic material directly into the mouth of the deceased. They both sought to buy back the breath that had been stolen, to ensure the dead could speak when it mattered most. Half a world away, across the sweeping steppes and misty mountains of Asia, another mighty empire developed its own extreme, obsessive method of equipping the dead. During the Han Dynasty, which flourished from 206 BC to 220 AD, the Chinese elite approached the problem of mortality with unparalleled extravagance and a terrifying determination. They didn't just place a piece of precious stone in the mouth to symbolize breath. They encased their rulers in entire suits of armor made of stone, attempting to cheat decay altogether. The Han Chinese buried their elite in magnificent, full-body suits meticulously crafted from thousands of small plaques of jade, all sewn together with gold, silver, or copper wire. Even experienced excavators paused when they saw the sheer scale of this obsession. The most famous discovery is the breathtaking burial suit of Prince Liu Sheng, who died in 1113 BC. His eternal armor is composed of exactly 2,498 individual jade pieces, painstakingly wired together with nearly 1 full kilogram of pure gold thread. The amount of labor required to polish and drill these thousands of pieces is staggering to contemplate. The purpose behind this staggering display of wealth was rooted in a profound, desperate belief about the physical body. In ancient Chinese cosmology and early alchemical thought, jade was believed to possess mystical properties that could completely prevent physical decay. It was thought to preserve the bodily form, locking the essential life force inside the corpse and granting a form of permanent physical immortality. To achieve this magical preservation, the Han elite went to extraordinary lengths. Jade plugs and specially carved covers were placed in all 9 natural openings of the human body. This included the ears, the nostrils, and, crucially, the mouth. A finely carved jade cicada, symbolizing rebirth, emergence from the earth, and eternal transformation, was often placed directly on the tongue. By sealing every orifice with jade, they believed they were trapping the vital energy, known as qi, preventing it from escaping into the void. Unlike the Egyptian approach, which was fundamentally about outfitting the dead for a long, dangerous journey to the Hall of Two Truths, the Chinese approach was about preventing the life force from ever leaving the body at all. It was a barricade against dissolution, a fortress of stone built around the fragile human form. Yet, if we travel north to the freezing fjords, dark pine forests, and storm-tossed coasts of Scandinavia, we find a culture that embraced the concept of a journey with literal, massive conviction. The Vikings did not try to preserve the flesh forever, nor did they try to seal the spirit inside the corpse with stone. Instead, they buried their elite in actual, massive, ocean-going ships. They believed with absolute certainty that the dead needed a physical vessel to sail to their ultimate destination, whether that was the raucous, bloody feasting halls of Valhalla, the gloomy, freezing realm of Hell, or the beautiful fields of Folkvang, depending entirely on how they lived and how they died, in battle or sickness. The scale of these burials is difficult to comprehend. Consider the Oseberg ship burial, discovered in Norway and dating to the year 834 AD. This was not a tiny symbolic model meant to magically grow in the afterlife. It was a magnificent, fully functional, 21-meter-long oak ship, dragged ashore by hundreds of strong hands and buried beneath a massive earthen mound. Inside, archaeologists found the remains of 2 prominent women, surrounded by wealth. But they were not alone. The ship was packed entirely full of provisions for the afterlife. There was abundant food, beautifully carved wooden furniture adorned with terrifying animal heads, agricultural tools, finely woven textiles, heavy wooden sledges for the snow, and the remains of numerous animal sacrifices, including horses and dogs. They were provided with literally everything a royal household would need to establish themselves on an eternal voyage. The Gokstad ship presents another astonishing, violent example. This massive, seaworthy vessel was buried with a formidable, heavy-set male warrior who bore the marks of battle. He was accompanied by a terrifying array of weapons, a wall of painted wooden shields locked along the hull, and the sacrificed bodies of powerful riding horses and hunting dogs. The parallel here is a matter of intensely practical philosophy. Like the ancient Egyptians carefully packing hundreds of Ushapti figures and Book of the Dead papyri into the dry sands, the Vikings deeply believed that the afterlife was a physical place that required practical, heavy equipment. You didn't simply die and magically arrive in a hazy paradise. You had to travel there, through dangerous, freezing, and unknown spiritual territory. And you desperately needed supplies, transportation, and sharpened weapons to survive the crossing. But what if a culture entirely rejects the idea of equipping the body altogether? Not all civilizations tried to preserve the physical form, encase it in jade armor, or load it onto massive wooden ships. In the high, thin, freezing air of the Himalayas, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition developed a profound, challenging practice known as a sky burial, or jator, which translates beautifully to giving alms to the birds. In this tradition, the body of the deceased is carried to a remote, wind-scoured mountaintop, far above the tree line. There, it is respectfully disassembled by a specialized ritual practitioner known as a ragyapa and offered to the waiting flocks of massive griffon vultures. The bones are crushed, mixed with roasted barley flour and yak butter, and scattered to the winds. Within a matter of hours, there is absolutely nothing left of the person who once lived. This might seem like a shocking desecration to a culture obsessed with mummification and preservation, but the underlying belief is one of supreme, selfless compassion. In Tibetan Buddhism, the physical body is viewed as nothing more than an empty, discarded vessel after the moment of death. The consciousness, the true self, has already moved on to navigate the terrifying and confusing intermediate state known as the bardo, eventually moving toward its next reincarnation. The flesh that remains is utterly useless to the dead, but it can provide vital sustenance to living, hungry creatures. Offering the body to the vultures is considered a final, profound act of generosity and a stark, visceral reminder of the impermanence of all physical things. This is the philosophical exact opposite of the ancient Egyptian approach. It is the ultimate rejection of the body, a deliberate unmaking of the flesh. But strangely, beautifully, it reveals the exact same underlying human fixation. It asks the same agonizing, unanswerable question: what happens after the final breath? And what is our profound responsibility to the vessel that remains behind? This sharp contrast actually illuminates what makes the Egyptian worldview so unique. The priests of the Nile didn't just care about the abstract, immaterial soul flying free like a bird. They believed, with every fiber of their being, that the physical body and the immortal spirit were linked forever, bound by magic and memory. The destruction of the body meant the total annihilation of the self. When we step back and look at the vast sweep of human history, a profound, almost heartbreaking realization comes into focus. What all these disparate, isolated cultures share is a universal, stubborn refusal to accept that death is simply the end of the story. Every single civilization we have examined, the meticulous, magic-obsessed Egyptians, the seafaring, philosophical Greeks, the jungle-dwelling, star-watching Maya, the jade-carving Chinese, the shipbuilding, warring Vikings, and the mountain-dwelling, ascetic Tibetans developed incredibly elaborate, desperately serious answers to the exact same terrifying question. What happens when the light finally fades and the final breath is drawn? The gleaming golden tongues found in the salt-crusted tombs of Marina el-Alamein are one exquisite, haunting answer. The polished jade bead resting inside the skeletal jaws of Pakal the Great is another. The massive, beautifully carved oak timbers of the Osiris ship, buried beneath damp Norwegian soil, is a third. The scattering of crushed bone dust on a freezing Himalayan peak is a fourth. They look so vastly different, yet they are all poignant, necessary responses to the same fundamental, terrifying human confrontation with our own inescapable mortality. They are the artifacts of our shared, desperate struggle against the long dark. The fact that these cultures, separated by immense oceans of water and oceans of time, with absolutely no contact with one another, independently developed the practice of placing precious, symbolic materials directly into the mouths of their dead, suggests something profound about human nature itself. The mouth is the physical instrument of our speech. It is the gate of our breath. It is the physical center of our identity, our ability to connect, to argue, to declare who we are to the world. It holds a universal, instinctual significance across every boundary of culture, geography, and time. We simply cannot bear the agonizing thought of our loved ones being silenced forever. Let's slow down for a moment and truly think about what that means. Let's try to imagine a parent standing in the blistering, unforgiving sun at Marina, el-Alamein, 2,000 years ago. They are standing before a freshly cut, dusty tomb in the pale limestone bedrock. Their beloved child has died. The grief is absolute, a crushing, suffocating weight that transcends time, history, and culture. They cannot change what has happened. They cannot bring the child back, but they have one final, desperate act of love available to them. Before the resin-soaked linen bandages are fully wrapped over the face, before the heavy stone sarcophagus is sealed shut in the dark forever, they take a small, impossibly thin piece of pure gold, carefully cut into the shape of a human tongue. They reach out, their hands trembling, and place it gently inside their child's silent mouth. They believe, they absolutely need to believe, that this small, quiet act will grant their child a powerful voice in eternity. That when this tiny, terrified soul wanders into the terrifying, torch-lit shadows of the Duat, when they finally stand trembling before the imposing, green-skinned form of Osiris and the intimidating, terrifying tribunal of 42 monstrous judges, that small piece of gold will flare with ancient magic. It will allow their child to speak clearly and without fear. It will allow them to say, "I am innocent. I am pure. I am worthy of the light. Please, let me pass through the heavy gates." Is that desperate, beautiful hope really so different from what any parent would do? Is it so different from what any of us would do right now? If we truly believed that we could reach across the impenetrable boundary of death and give someone we love just one more chance to speak, if we could buy them one more breath, one more word of defense against the creeping darkness, the golden tongues of Marina, el-Alamein are not simply the strange, macabre relics of a superstitious, long-forgotten past. They are tangible, heartbreaking artifacts of human love. They are crystallized, pure hope. They are the physical manifestation of our desperate, beautiful, universal need to do something, anything, in the face of death's cold, agonizing finality. They prove that we have always fought, in whatever way we could, against the silence, and the wind-swept sands of the Mediterranean coast are far from empty. The ongoing, painstaking excavations at Marina, el-Alamein continue to yield new secrets from the earth, pulling back the veil on a complex society where ancient Egyptian magic and Greek philosophy bled seamlessly into one another. As dedicated archaeologists carefully brush away the accumulated dust of 2 millennia, we are left to wonder what other desperate, beautiful acts of devotion still lie hidden in the limestone bedrock, waiting to finally speak. Because ultimately, the golden tongues belong to a universal human pattern, the absolute, stubborn refusal to accept death as silence. Across every continent, every era, every complex belief system, humans have placed precious objects in the mouths and hands of their dead, refusing to let death have the final word. The golden tongues of Marina, el-Alamein are Egypt's beautiful, defiant answer to a question every civilization has asked. The story of the golden tongues, however, is still being meticulously written. Marina, el-Alamein is far from fully excavated, and the sun-baked necropolis extends much further along the Mediterranean coast than current archaeological trenches have ever reached. Beneath the salt-crusted sand, more sealed tombs almost certainly await the careful brush of the excavator. Every excavation season brings profound new discoveries, not just at this windswept Greco-Roman harbor town, but across the entire, vast landscape of Egypt. The recent years have ushered in an undeniable golden age of Egyptian archaeology, revealing wonders that rival the legendary finds of the 20th century. We have witnessed the sands of Saqqara yielding its unprecedented cache of hundreds of brightly painted, perfectly sealed sarcophagi. We have seen the lost golden city of Aten emerge near Luxor, its mud brick walls remarkably preserved under the punishing desert heat. We have watched Taposiris Magna, the sprawling temple dedicated to Osiris, become the focal point of an ongoing, high-stakes search for the long-lost tomb of Cleopatra. But actually, the true revolution isn't just what we are finding, but exactly how we are finding it. Modern technology is fundamentally transforming what is possible in the field, altering the very nature of discovery. Ground-penetrating radar now peers deep beneath the earth, identifying anomalous chambers and hidden vertical shafts before a single trowel breaks the surface. High-resolution CT scanning allows researchers to peer inside tightly wrapped mummies and heavy sealed sarcophagi, revealing skeletal structures, hidden amulets, and internal artifacts without ever unwrapping the fragile, crumbling linen bandages. Advanced DNA analysis is slowly untangling incredibly complex family relationships, revealing the genetic origins and ancestral lineages of the buried dead. What does this rapid technological advancement mean for the mystery of the golden tongues? The possibility is nothing short of staggering. Future seasons at Marina el-Alamein could reveal entirely intact burial assemblages containing even more of these divine golden mouthpieces. We might soon uncover them in perfectly undisturbed contexts that tell us exactly how the burial ritual was performed, step by meticulous step. Imagine finding a high priest's papyrus scroll resting alongside a mummy, detailing the precise rhythmic incantation spoken aloud when the gold foil was placed upon the tongue. Even experienced excavators paused when they surveyed the vast, untouched sectors of the site. The sealed tombs that remain hidden in the bedrock are not just theoretical anomalies. We know they are absolutely there. Extensive ground surveys suggest dozens of additional subterranean chambers carved deeply into the solid limestone. What is waiting silently inside them? Will we find more golden tongues? Or perhaps entirely new types of amulets designed to protect the dead in ways we haven't yet imagined? Could there be burial goods that completely rewrite our understanding of Greco-Roman Egyptian syncretism? The Mediterranean coastline still guards its secrets closely, but it is slowly yielding them to the light. But as we anticipate the spectacular discoveries of the future, we must look closely at what the present evidence actually means. The practice of placing pure gold in the mouths of the dead tells us profoundly about the living, not just the deceased. It reveals a complex society populated with exceptionally skilled goldsmiths, master artisans who could hammer raw, heavy gold into delicate, anatomically precise, tongue-shaped foils that would rest perfectly within a human mouth. It reveals a robust, thriving economy, one wealthy enough that precious gold could be permanently spent on the dead rather than circulated among the living merchants of the busy harbor. What makes this especially haunting isn't the gold itself, but the immense theological infrastructure it represents. It reveals a deeply entrenched priestly class that codified exactly what the dead needed for their perilous journey, and precisely how to provide it. This was a society where the belief in the afterlife wasn't some abstract philosophy or casual superstition. It was a practical, unavoidable reality that required tangible, material preparation. You didn't just hope for a good afterlife, you engineered it. You bought the protective amulets, hired the skilled embalmers, commissioned the magical spells, and secured the divine gold. But the most striking detail wasn't the gold, it was who received it. The presence of golden tongues in the mouths of small children reveals parents who love their offspring enough to surrender immense, tangible wealth. They didn't give their children gold to wear as beautiful jewelry, nor did they give it to them to spend as currency in the dark underworld. They gave them gold so they could speak with it in eternity. This realization shifts our perspective completely. The golden tongues aren't just ancient artifacts neatly cataloged in a sterile museum case. They are intimate, glowing windows into the hearts of the people who made them, who held them trembling in their hands, and who placed them into the mouths of the ones they had lost forever. They speak of a desperate, overwhelming need to protect the most vulnerable from the unfathomable darkness of the Duat. When we step back and look at the entirety of this ancient puzzle, the picture that emerges is one of profound, interlocking complexity. We began with a stunning, completely unexpected discovery: 24 thin gold foil tongues, found inside sealed rock-cut tombs at Marina el-Alamein, resting quietly on Egypt's sun-drenched Mediterranean coast. From that windswept harbor, we descended into the terrifying, elaborate belief system that necessitated them. We stood in the shadowy, immense Hall of Two Truths, where the dead faced the ultimate trial before the god Osiris and a jury of 42 terrifying, monstrous deities. We learned that the deceased had to recite the 42 negative confessions aloud, flawlessly, in their own clear voice, to prove their heart was pure and their soul was worthy of paradise. We saw how brilliant material theology provided the ultimate solution. Gold was not just earthly wealth, it was the imperishable, eternal, glowing flesh of the gods. By placing a golden tongue in the mouth of a fragile mummy, the living believed they were fundamentally transforming a decaying human organ into a divine, indestructible instrument capable of speaking absolute truth before the divine tribunal. We examined the complete, heavy burial kit required for this terrifying journey, the watchful eye of Horus for ultimate protection, the heavy stone heart scarab to forcibly silence the heart's own treacherous testimony, the massive granite sarcophagus to preserve the physical vessel forever, and the golden tongue to guarantee the eternal voice. So, who were they burying? They were burying the ultimate synthesis of two great worlds. We witnessed a fascinating cultural fusion, where rigid Egyptian spiritual precision met the pragmatic Greek underworld traditions. At vibrant Greco-Roman sites like Marina, el-Alamein, the ancient Greek Charon's obol, the simple coin meant for the ferryman of the dead, morphed seamlessly into the Egyptian golden tongue. It was a brilliant, highly syncretic solution to the universal, terrifying problem of human mortality. And as we zoomed out from the sands of Egypt, we recognized a massive, worldwide pattern. From the vivid green Maya jade mouthpieces of King Pakal, to the elaborate, heavy Chinese jade burial suits of Prince Liu Sheng, to the burning Viking ships at Oseberg, and the stark, brutal Tibetan sky burials. Every great civilization has confronted the exact same terrifying question: what happens when the breathing finally stops? Yet, amidst all this sweeping historical grandeur, it is the smallest, quietest discoveries that echo the loudest. The tiny golden tongues placed in the mouths of children. These were not state-mandated burials. These were desperate gifts from parents whose love transcended the absolute, final boundary of death itself. What emerges from these collective discoveries is not merely a dusty archaeological record. It is a brilliant testament to something fundamental about being human. It is the belief, shared across every ancient culture and every forgotten era, that death is not silence, that the human voice matters, that somewhere, somehow, in the vast dark, the dead still speak. Let us consider the profound, crushing intimacy of that final act. The next time an archaeologist carefully brushes away the millennia of accumulated dust, opens a sealed rock-cut tomb at Marina, el-Alamein, and finds a thin gold foil resting exactly where a human tongue once was, they won't just be looking at a shimmering artifact. They will be looking at a direct message. It is a message sent forward through time from someone who lived roughly 2,000 years ago. Someone who stood weeping by a lifeless body, their heart entirely breaking, and who loved that person enough to place pure gold delicately between their cold lips. They were someone who believed, with every single fiber of their being, that love could give voice to the voiceless. The golden tongues speak. They do not speak with the long-lost, forgotten words of the dead, but with the fierce, undying hope of the living. They say, clearly and universally across the centuries, I could not follow you into death. I could not protect you from the terrifying, crushing darkness of the underworld, but I could give you this. I could give you one small, perfect piece of the eternal, shaped exactly like the part of you that mattered most, your voice. I could ensure that when you finally stand before the terrifying gods, you will not be silent. Perhaps that is what makes these small golden artifacts so profoundly, undeniably haunting. It is not that they are made of precious metal. It is not that they are thousands of years old, surviving the slow, grinding crush of history. It is that they represent the exact same impulse every single human being feels when confronted with the death of someone they deeply love. It is the desperate, beautiful, entirely futile need to give them just one more word, one more chance to speak, one more opportunity to be heard in the vast, overwhelming silence of eternity. The golden tongues of Marina, el-Alamein are not merely relics of a strange, forgotten religion. They are love letters to eternity, placed in the mouths of the dead by the living, ensuring that even in the darkest tomb, the human voice would permanently endure. They represent the oldest, deepest human conviction that death is not the end of the conversation. They have waited 2,000 years beneath the heavy sand to tell their magnificent story, and now, at last, they have. What strikes you most about the golden tongues? The terrifying theological precision of the afterlife trial, the absolute heartbreak of the children's burials, or the stunning parallel with the Maya jade tradition halfway across the world? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you could equip someone you love for the afterlife, if you truly believed it would work, what would you give them? If this journey into the ancient past meant something to you, a like and subscribe helps us keep exploring the ancient world's most remarkable stories. Until next time, as always, stay curious.